It'll keep.
Okay. So how are you?
I'm great.
Good. Good.
Yeah, we're really busy and I'm working on the year-long virtual recovery program for people that want to experience recovery and the things that we do in a recovery residence in the privacy of their own home because they probably need to go back to work.
Very cool. Now you have, first of all, I'm Darren Brooks, Dr. Brooks, and this is the Miracle Healings podcast. I have with me today as my amazing guest, Adrienne, and she has, I mean, we'll talk about her recovery story, but just as we started, you mentioned your work. Tell everyone what you do.
So I'm a recovery advocate. That means that I fight for the rights of people that are addicted and their families. We have several ways that we work with people. First, we have an in-person recovery residence community called the Lodge at Delray Beach. It's what happens after treatment. So most people are familiar from shows like Intervention and Dr. Drew Pinsky. Uh, but there's way more to the addiction recovery continuum than just detox and treatment. There's also recovery residences where you go 6 months to a year and a half and really, really get a firm foundation for the rest of your recovery. Statistics show that if you can make it to that first year, you have an 80% chance of success. And if you don't make it to that first year, your chances drop to less than 15%.
Oh, wow. So that's really critical, having that much time behind you to establish that new mindset and that new lifestyle. That's a
Exactly.
scary statistic. My goodness.
It's a scary statistic. And what's even worse is, things have really changed. The face of addiction is changing. It
Mm,
doesn't look like it once did. It certainly doesn't look like it did 100 years ago. And it doesn't even look like it did 20 years ago. Since 2019, addiction, overdose, suicide, mental health, domestic violence, child abuse, all are up 40%. We're really struggling after COVID.
wow. Yeah. I mean, I knew we were struggling before, but I didn't know it was getting, I mean, I know it's getting worse, but since your boots are on the ground in that arena, certainly more than mine are, that is frightening and certainly a call to arms and help for anybody. So anybody interested in helping. So I'm thrilled to have you on, and I'm glad
Yeah.
for the work that you do. I mean, bless you for that. That's amazing. A lot of people can point back to your recovery as a catalyst for your own business, and now as you give back, as you kind of take your recovery and you've decided, it sounds like, to just completely change the world with a healthier mindset and resources and all of that. So anyway, I love that. I think that is spectacular.
Thank you. We worked really hard. I think my husband and I, so because he struggles with addiction and I struggle with a physical illness,
Mm,
what we kind of realized as we were running the lodge at Delray Beach, first we realized what doesn't happen in treatment, what life lessons aren't taught there.
mm.
I mean, the average age coming out of treatment is 24 now.
Wow.
And 24 is not what 24 used to be, number
Right.
one. But number two, 24, they don't, it's weird, right? They don't know how to look people in the eyes. So we literally, you can't just say, go get a job. You have to walk in with them, get the application, go back to the house, fill the application out, work on a resume if that's necessary. We have people that are C-suite executives, pro sports players and coaches, politicians, lawyers, they firefighter that just relapsed again. They're not doing their jobs while they're getting treatment.
Right. Well,
And
that
yeah,
a lot of layers and a lot of hand holding and yeah, nice work out there. Nice.
yeah, yeah. And we're taking it virtual because 80% of the people that graduate from treatment go back home.
Hmm.
And first of all, only 2% of the people who seek treatment actually find it.
Wow.
Because treatment really, it's in the medical model and the allopathic medical model. And if you don't have insurance, so for example, there's a big difference between the number of Black and brown people who are addicted and the number of Black and brown people who are in support groups.
Yeah.
Drastically different.
Yeah. I mean, I bet that's true. I mean, I completely believe that. So,
Yeah, but, there is hope, and there's help out there. Like we always have talked about through the years, whether it's on your end. But Jim and I really did, and this was after the bridge,
yeah.
come up with the ABCs of recovery. Accept your situation and take action, no matter whether it's physical or mental. Be brave enough to start over and over and over until you reach your dream, and create a stellar support system for yourself.
I like it.
If
I like
you
it.
could do those three things, you're pretty solid throughout the day.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's good for me. That's good advice for anybody, let alone
Yeah.
some fighting addiction. That's just solid advice. So I love that.
That's why I think my time at the bridge was so valuable. I learned a lot about what it means to be ill, what it means to be healthy, the certainly long journey in between those two things,
Right. Right.
because we both know, and we've talked many times about it, right? This is like a merry-go-round that you get to the bottom and you're like, wait, stop, I want to get out. And the guy's like, nope, you're going again.
It's
That happens a few times. And then you look down and you're like, son of a gun, the handle's on my side.
it's so true.
You still go around a couple times before
It's
you actually let yourself out.
yeah, it's so true. And I mean, we could talk all day as friends, but I'm going to kind of introduce our relationship a bit because nobody else will understand. So you came through the bridge program. So
I
I
did.
started the bridge program. It's not for substance abuse or chemical addiction or the elderly or wayward youth or anything like that. We've tried to focus on chronic illnesses like depression, anxiety, chronic pain, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, lots of forms of lupus, even some forms of MS, anything that people have been over medicated for and under treated for.
Right.
So, I mean, everybody that comes to the bridge is usually on vast doses of medicines for mental health, for physical health, for sleep, for I mean, all of that, but they're not doing well. They're not thriving, and they're not, like you said, fulfilling their dreams. And it's not because a lot of people haven't tried, right? A lot of practitioners have tried hard and using the best knowledge they possibly can to prescribe and to counsel and all that. So it's not a fault for the effort that happens with people
No,
that are
I
sick.
agree completely. I
So
don't think it's malicious in intent.
the
You know,
effort,
I think we kind of got here accidentally. There was a period where the Sackler family convinced a lot of people that a medication that was highly addictive was not addictive. And it was a concerted effort. It was a three-pronged marketing strategy to the doctors, the pharmacists, and the patients.
yeah.
And it worked too well.
Yeah, being a physician, I mean, I have to stop my practice multiple times a week to entertain the latest and greatest from a drug rep. I mean, that's just part of the gig. And you're right. I mean, some of them are errant, some aren't, but I think everybody's a little bit more cognizant these days, hopefully. So
Yeah.
I think that's been reined in some, but once that horse got let out of the barn, boy, it's run, right? And
Because
now,
you know how many people that we get that are after you, right? If they had just gotten to you first, but what ended up happening was they had whatever injury they have, they're taking narcotic medication and they get addicted.
right,
20, it says the literature says this medication is addictive with a period at the end of that sentence.
right,
So
right,
it's not like, oh, well, if you take it on every second Thursday, you're going to end up in busting out in handcuffs.
right.
No, it really that really did a lot. And then of course when the pill mills started drying up here in Florida, That's where the fentanyl, the synthetic fentanyl started filling in.
Yeah, and I live in a pretty small town, and I happen to have a neighbor who is a former police officer, and he said, you know, we've seen gangs, we've seen violence, we've seen opiates and heroin and all kinds of stuff, but he says now it's fentanyl. He said it's just so cheap and so rampant, you
It's
know.
in everything. They've put it in
Right.
everything.
So so let's go back, you and I, a little
Yep.
bit. I could walk down memory lane with you and chat. Adrienne and I have a tendency to both be in different choirs and preach back and forth. And it's awesome. But tell me, well, I'll kind of tell everybody. I first met you. You were dropped off by your mom. I'm assuming a well-meaning woman, but in really, really rough shape.
Yeah.
Extremely underweight, feeding tube. Do you want to speak to that at all? Rather than tell your story, how did you show up at the bridge?
Oh, I was, yeah, I was a hot mess. I Mom and I basically, so this was at the beginning of 2009. To set that up, I had been in hospice for 4 months in 2008. I end up back in the hospital over the new year, with another pancreas attack. And my mom and we had just a brief moment between us. We looked each other in the eyes and we said, can these drugs be killing me?
Mm.
Like, Darren, the amount of feeding tubes, central lines, the amount of medication that I was legitimately being prescribed by a physician to go down a feeding tube was insanity. And
And your weight. I mean, you
I
weigh.
was 70, what, 76 pounds, something
Ah,
like that.
yeah.
And my right leg was not working at all because all of the drugs they had given me in the hospital, I passed out with my leg backwards.
Yeah.
So when I came to, my leg didn't.
Yeah, that's everybody needs to know that that's why you're on Miracle Healings. I mean, when you get wheeled into a facility we were not prepared for you. I'll be honest, way back then. And your mom basically said, "Hey, good luck." And I'm like, "Wait, what do you mean?" Well, she's got a feeding tube and here's her meds, and this is when you have to push it, and she's not that responsive sometimes, and she can't walk. And I'm like, hold on, like we do ambulatory, you know, and your mom, you might not know this actually, but I'm going to divulge this right here on national podcast. Your mom said, if anything happens, I won't hold you responsible. We've done everything we can. And I thought, what, and she drove away. And
Yeah.
I looked over at you and I thought, oh no. you know, it's like,
Now what?
no, I mean, I want to help, but this seems awfully precarious for what we are offering. But there was something about you and something, about that fit with the program, and you weren't done yet. And obviously, weren't dead yet, in spite of the hospice and everybody's bets against you. And as we got the feeding tube removed and got some weight on you and reduced some of the medicines, I mean, that kind of bounced you off of the bottom. And I started to meet this person I had not met before. That was pretty spectacular. And you started talking about dreams and hopes and wanting to build a center. And it went from literally like on death's door for lots of reasons, with lots of people betting against you. And I think that's the part about your story that's so impressive to me, is a lot of medical people, including a lot of loved ones and family, they had already bet against you.
I know.
And this
I
was
know.
your chance to say, no, there's something still alive. There's something still glowing. I've still got a lot of living to do. And kind of, and I'll try to be quiet. I get so excited about your story. It's, even though it's been so many years, we've remained dear friends. But
Yeah.
you, as
No,
you
it
as you bounce, like how did that trajectory just keep going and going and going? Like, what did you do? I mean,
Well, here I want to tell you a story. I don't think you know about this. So we went to Zion National Park, and we were in the gift shop, and I bought a frappuccino, and Shauna was like wigging out, you know, and I'm like, it's a frappuccino, right? Like, but I had totally slept through the whole intake, right? So I didn't have a clue that I wasn't supposed to be having frappuccino. I'm like, what the hell? It's a frappuccino.
yeah, that's
And
funny.
she was losing her mind. She's like, you're making it very hard, Adrienne. You agreed to do
Yeah.
this and this and this. And I'm just like, yeah, whatever.
You're like, it's
I'm surprised you didn't throw me off the cliff, Darren.
no, no. I was afraid that you would make it to the bottom. I mean, gee. But as you move, so the bridge program, just briefly, we take a very integrated approach to that kind of medicine. We have great mental health, we have good nutrition, we have good spiritual counseling, not non-denominational, no dogma, just spiritual connection and base, energy work, excellent energy work, really good alternative practitioners. We do everything from Reiki and sound bathing to wild mustangs and hiking and meditative work and yoga and acupuncture and chiropractic and acupressure. I mean, all kinds of things, trying to make sure that these trillions of your cells that are all attempting to play in this symphony and make music, right? To play with some sense of cohesion, that they get back together and they start working together again. I mean, when you're chronic, like you've been, and like I've been too, I mean, I'll tell my story on a different podcast, but when you're chronic, it's really, really difficult because as soon as you feel like the music's playing, that somebody will smack the timpani, and then somebody else will smash their violin over somebody else's head, and you'll be like, wait, what is going on? And you can't get the music that you want, and it's chaotic and it's painful, and the audience hates it, and it's and that the conductor standing there, subconsciously going, look, I'm doing the best I can, and then the conscious mind looks back at the mess and says, I have no idea what to do. And so you check your insurance,
Right.
like you mentioned, it's like, oh, well, we pay for 2 sessions a week. Let's get you one physical therapy session. You probably need a med evaluation by your PCP. He's busy for a month though, so we'll try to get in there when we can. And then it's like, well, what do I do now? We'll go home and just do your best, and we'll see it. The system is not geared for health, especially
No.
recovering the health of somebody that's in trouble. It's not geared for that. It manages symptoms with myriads of pills and some therapy, but overall the healing just isn't there. So the bridge was created to try to provide an environment, a live-in 3-week environment where people could peel all of those layers back and say, all right, I've got this relationship issue, I've got this early trauma, I've got these sexual issues, I've got these nutritional issues, I've got these physiological issues, I've got this anomaly in my back, I had this car accident, I'm missing a leg, whatever. And then as we move those layers apart, we help reassemble the beauty of that. And this is kind of cheesy, but I'm going to say it anyway. And one of the only quotes really that has gotten into me over lots and lots of years, and I've read millions of cheap site quotes, right? Millions of like positive thinking affirmations. But this one was very, very impactful for me. And it's about, and I believe the story is true. I don't know all of the perfect words, but somebody contemplated the David that Michelangelo sculpted.
Oh, wow.
They contemplated the David and they thought, this is the most perfect rendition of a man I've ever seen. And they looked at every angle and they watched the sun come up and go down on the David, and they had to find the sculptor. So they go to the master and they say, how did you sculpt such a perfect being out of this chunk of rock? Like, how do you do that? And Michelangelo sits for a moment and says, David was always within the stone. The angel was always within the stone I carved until I set him free. And suddenly I had rather than me feeling like I needed a huge bottle of glue and a bunch of tiny chips of rock to try to assemble me, with therapy and counseling and a pill and this and that. And, oh, I got to recreate, I got to do that. And it was like, no, I'm already in there. Like, I'm already whole. Everyone is. And they're all equally whole and spectacular. But how do we get rid of the garbage so they can see that? So it's good therapy, good recovery medicine is about taking away what isn't you. It's not about helping you
Right.
assemble you. It's about taking away what isn't you. So you can, once the
You
garbage
can uncover the beauty inside.
yeah, once the insecurities and the
Yeah.
addictions and all of that, once that's removed, you kind of stand there and go, I'm pretty amazing. And
Yeah.
in that
And
moment,
and that's okay to say.
yes, and in that moment, you're like, oh my gosh, and that means everybody else is too. Everyone.
Everyone.
Whoa, I can forgive myself. That means I've got to forgive everybody else for whatever. And we're
And
all,
I think that's the first point of growing up, right? Forgiving yourself, forgiving everybody else, forgiving your parents.
yeah,
We hear it all the time because we get a clientele that likes to not get a job.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it's amazing how far lengths people will go to not work.
Yeah. And it used to be such a basic thing when I grew up. I mean, yeah, it was a long time ago, but when I grew up, everybody worked. Everybody. I
Of
mean,
course, you don't work, you don't eat, right?
adults and children. There were. I mean, it was just a societal
I
expectation.
babysat, right, when I was like 14. Nobody called child labor laws or
Right. My dad let me pick out some of the produce from our gardens and our orchard and our little vineyard we had and sell it on the corner. I was sweeping parking. So in junior high, I wanted money. My dad's like, well, I mean, we have a little, but not a lot. And I'm like, well, I want a bike. And he's like, well, you're going to have to earn some money. And I thought, what do I do? He says, well, let's think about it. And so I went to Ace Hardware and bought a push broom and took it to school on my bike. And then on the way home, I'd stop in and ask everybody, hey, do you need your parking lot swept? Can I? And most people said they saw this little dude, with the broom. And like, sure, I'll give you a couple bucks. So I swept parking lots on the way home and ended up with a bike and blisters on my hands. And like, well, that's okay.
yeah. But it felt good, right?
Yeah, you associate that with being a productive member of society. And then my dad,
Absolutely.
we had cows, we had, a big garden, and both my parents were teachers, they were educators. And so, but those values, and I'm not touting my upbringing. I certainly had my issues and problems too, but the ethic of contributing as a base, like you said, it's foreign to a lot of these kids. It's just foreign. And
Yeah.
probably for you, it's completely exasperating to have somebody maybe never have had a job in their 20s because they've just danced between home and addictions and parties and pseudo college and whatever. And you're like, mom and dad are like, go get a job. And like, wait, what?
To the regular C-suite executive who's been caught at work because during COVID, like everybody else, he went out with the guys for a couple of nights before COVID. After COVID, he had a box of alcohol delivered to his house.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
And I don't care if you're a priest. You feed a priest a case of beer a day. At the end of the month, he's addicted.
Yes. I mean, absolutely. And for you though, I mean, yeah, sorry, I get sidetracked a bit, but for
No,
you,
yeah, I wanted to say something though, real quick before I forget this point. We're on the same continuum, just different points, right? Because I feel like we see people after they could have gotten help from you.
yeah,
They run down the we've seen it so many times, people in recovery long term, and then they hurt their rotator cuff
yeah,
and they get 30 days of Percocet from their doctor.
right, right. And then they get 4 refills because the doctor's busy and the nerve or whatever. But
Right.
but for you, like, I mean, we talk. I want everybody. I want this to be clear to everybody. Like, Adrienne came from this dark, really broken, terrifyingly close to death place, and now we have discussions about running programs. Adrienne has her own program. That experience of recovery for her, right? For you, I mean, as you moved through that, you had to fight pills and
Right.
addictions and weight and getting that tube out and eating after all those years. And I mean, you battle through all of those demons and you meet a great guy and you get married and you're healthy and you decide to start your own program. And it's just this amazingly cool story
Yeah.
about what someone can do to go back and contribute rather than say I'm going to enjoy my recovery. Oh my gosh, I just I'm going to feel good. No, I want to
Yeah,
help.
but I don't think I have the right to sit on the sidelines of life. It's that was always there, even in the Adrienne that was dropped off in the beginning.
Yeah,
No, that's why you how do you get self-esteem? You do esteemable things.
yeah.
So the converse is also true. If you have a disability or a chronic condition and you let people do for you things that you could do for yourself, it is corrosive to self-esteem
Yes, agreed. Agreed. And that goes for everything. I
for
mean,
everything.
and then after our program, people we interface with our loved ones, and I hear these wild things. Well, should I not make sure he has 3 cubes of ice in his waters? I bring it to him out in the living room. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're counting the cubes of ice in his water because it has to be such a precise temperature to manage his this chronic craziness, that he slipped into physically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually. They're like, well, that's what we do. I'm like, you can't. And then
Yeah, it's enabling him.
it's enabling. And then oftentimes the loved one of the patient will say, well, what's my job then? What do I do? I've been in charge of helping this person
Yeah,
for months or years. So what if they go get well and get a job? What do I do? And I said, well, you have to redefine your relationship. If you're both changing your identities, and the only way out of a chronic cycle, I'll preach a little bit about that.
yeah,
The only way out of any chronic cycle, whether it's thought or physical issues or anomalies or spirituality or whatever, you've got to change your identity. Otherwise, you'll say
agreed.
the same words about, well, I am depressed, I am anxious, I am in pain, I have Ehlers-Danlos, I can't because I was molested. I like this I preceded by an excuse or preceded by a trauma and then an excuse, probably. So the I, and this is how I feel, and this is why. And it's almost like, don't mess with me. I've had it
Right.
really rough. I have reasons to do and think everything I'm doing. I mean, I have a gal in the facility right now, who said that, and this is just yesterday. She said, I'm not eating, I'm not drinking, and it's making me feel unsafe. What are you going to do about it? And I was like, well, if you're choosing not to eat and you're choosing not to drink, and then the effect of your choices are feeling unsafe, and now you want me to fix that, I said, okay, then just eat and drink. She goes, well, I can't. I said, well, do you want me to hold you down? Well, no, I would call the cops. I'm like, so this is tricky. This recovery process, at some point, all of us have to shift and sit back and say, I cannot believe I've become this identity. I can't believe
That's it right there.
can't believe
Right.
I've adopted this personality, and I'm using words that are forever like I am and I can't and most of it is I won't, and or a lot of it is I don't know how. I want to, but I don't know how to.
That's us for a lot of time. I mean, when you get told by a little boy that he can't clean his bathroom because he never cleaned the bathroom before
Yeah,
because he's had a maid,
right. Oof, yeah, yeah,
and you just go like, no wonder you're here.
right.
Um,
It starts early, right? It starts with basic stuff.
Basic stuff, but and I want people to understand too, recovery is not a straight line. I didn't just go to the bridge and take a magic pill and things turned around. Yes, I did go back home. I did end up getting married. I was ill for a lot of our relationship, and you do it anyway, and really it was, I'll tell you what the turning point was really for me was 4.5 years ago when they were going to put me back on liquid nutrition that goes through an IV that goes into your heart. I would have to turn my house into a hospital again and infuse TPN every night.
Yeah.
And I just said, no, it's a bag of dextrose, 70% sugar,
Right.
right? The vitamins I draw up in the vials. So there's got to be a better way.
Right.
That's the point that everybody gets to when they need to get to you. As soon as they say there's got to be a better way, they need to be on the horn with either me or you.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Or someone, anybody that can,
Anybody that can
anybody,
help
yeah,
for
anybody
real.
that can say, this identity is what's killing you. It's
Yeah.
it's it's this identity that you've acquired that you're believing that's going to destroy you.
And you can stop at any time, by the way.
You can. You
Is it
need.
easy? No.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, if you want to do that, if you want to change your identity, really truly buckle up because you're going to have to come to grips and face to face with your insecurities and your demons and your past and your future and your moments and just say, I don't want this anymore. I remember my big turning point. My wife, my first wife and um, I lost that marriage. Of course, I blamed her because I was so undeveloped intimately, and I just blamed her, and then as the years went by, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was my fault. She was great, like she was a good girl, and here I was like, I have no idea how to connect intimately and I don't know what to do. So as we learn and we develop, the critical piece for me is I stopped looking for relief. And at the bridge we draw this thing that kind of comes down and stops at a point, and when you're in pain or miserable, you either search for relief, which is medicine, television, gambling,
Food.
sleep, food, whatever. Really, I just want to feel better. Right now, I want to feel better. That quest for relief will leave you sick forever. And the
Yeah.
other piece, if you decide not to go down the I want relief track and you go over to the I want to develop as a human being track, that's a whole nother difficult issue where you have to sit down with your depression. I remember the first time I did this, I sat down with my depression and my anxiousness and I said, all right, I've hated you my whole life. I've medicated you. I've prayed against you. I've fasted. I've wailed to God, to destroy you. But today, this morning, I've got a notebook that doesn't have anything written in it and a pen. And we're going to sit down together and I'm going to listen to you. I want to learn what you've been trying to say. And I start bawling in a really cool way. I'm just like, I can't believe you're doing that. It's like, it felt, this is so silly to admit, but because I mean, by this time I'm almost 30, right?
Yeah.
But I remember feeling like this feels so grown up. I was like,
Yeah. I'm so proud of myself.
it's like, wow, this is really cool. And I took some great notes and learned a lot. I still do. I mean, I still take great notes. I still have triggers. I still have things that zap. But
Absolutely.
you know, but
It's hard for me to go into a doctor's office, you know.
but
It
that
will probably always be.
yeah, but that base, those things that used to terrify me have been kiln dried and glazed and fired and grouted, and now I get to stand on those. They don't go away. I liken it to like all of my demons. Every morning they jump into the back of my van and they start in, hey idiot, like what mistake you gonna make today? And you just hear
Yeah.
the chatter and
And everybody else is cheering them on, like, yeah, you dumb.
you tell him he's and but as the chatter escalates, and I do make wrong turns and I get made fun of by my subconscious and whatever. The difference now compared to when I was really less developed and way more in trouble is that I drive. I drive.
Yes.
I used to let other things take turns driving. Well, okay, depression, you can go ahead and drive. I'll hunker down over here and bawl, or anxiety, you drive, I'll be terrified. Or insecurity, go ahead and drive. I'm going to choose a bad partner and I'm going to just eat too much and sleep all day. Go ahead and drive because I don't know what I'm doing. But the difference now is it's not that everything solves and goes away and gets quiet. It's that you really can learn to drive. And in spite of the chaos, like in spite of the things that are going to keep winging themselves at you for the rest of your life. I think it's really important to state that good recovery, you have to know that it's driver's ed. It's not that they disappear. It's
Yeah.
not that they go away. It's that you learn to sit there and grin as you know, the spit wads get thrown and the comments get leveled, you know. And
It takes a lot of perseverance and resilience to do that.
yeah, and I joke, I just keep a couple of juice boxes and cheese sticks, you know, and
Yeah.
I just chuck them in the back as I go, like, you guys shut up, you know. And every
Well, I've named some of them.
yeah.
Critical is Callie,
Mm,
and emotional is Emmy.
I like
So those two battle it out a lot. But when I started realizing, because my family of origin that I came from is like, if there's something wrong with it, just cut it off
yeah. Or medicate it, right?
or medicate it, right? And that's not always the answer.
Yeah,
You know,
I
you
agree.
can't divorce yourself from a part of yourself,
Yeah,
no matter what you think of it.
yeah. I
I love that because I journal my grandmother almost every day, and I love that you sat down and like, no, this is a relationship with all these characters up in here.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
And
if you can't expect, like, I wouldn't have as good a relationship with you if I didn't ever talk to you, right?
yeah.
So you got to get down with this part of you. Like, I know that you're part of me, so you can't want our destruction. What
Right.
are you trying to say?
Yeah. And usually the lessons are profound. They're not even bad or negative. They're profound. It's just the requirement that they when you start listening to yourself and you start really taking a hard assessment of the choices you've made and the consequences of those choices, and you realize that there was a person that made those choices and felt that way that you don't want to be anymore.
Right.
Like I don't want to be that person anymore.
I know.
I
Yeah.
recognize what it was, but I don't want to be that anymore. And the beauty of a human is you don't have to be. You don't. You can become a morning person. You can try something athletic. You can get rid of a relationship. You can attack. You can mend a relationship. You can go back to school. You can do a billion things, but you don't have to stay stuck. Period. You just
No,
don't.
you don't.
And
There,
so,
no, not unless you want to.
right. But when you say I don't want to do that anymore, and I think the fun thing about your story is that when you really said that, and I always ask people when they come through the program, I've seen thousands over a lot of years now. I when they say I want to get better, and I look them straight in the eye and I say, do you mean that?
Yeah.
Really? And they're like, oh yeah, of course, that's all I want. I have always wanted that. And I said, no, I want you to think about the consequences of getting well, what that's going to take. You've got to mean it with everything. And they look at me like, oh no, you know,
So that's one of my favorite stories in the Bible is the guy on the mat. And he's the healing pool is stirring up, and he's like, oh, the healing pool's stirring up, and I don't have anybody to carry me over there. I'm disabled from birth. And Jesus is like, well, do you want to be well?
right, right.
And he's like, yeah, 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 yeah. He's like, then take up your mat and walk.
Yeah, yeah,
It action is required.
yeah, it is. And that you can develop courage with encouragement, but at some point you've got to do it. And
Got
I
to
was
do it. You got to do it.
Dr. Granger, like I was without a home for a while, a long time ago, during the darkest times of my life, you know, and she took me and let me stay in her basement. Beautiful home, I mean, beautiful woman, clinical psychologist. Beautiful. I mean, this lady is just spectacular. And she had a husband leave her in her 40s and her four kids and say she'd never, or he'd never.
Wow.
And so she'd worked through some devastation. Very smart lady. So I was kind of telling her my story. And she goes, well, why don't you get up? Why don't you move? Why don't you get a job? Why don't you get out? You've got to do something. You've got to, you know. And I said, what would I do? I don't even know how to do that. And she said, Darren, listen, be afraid, do it anyway. And I was like, what? No, I told you I was afraid. She goes, well, no, I don't care about the being afraid. You got to do it anyway. And that
Yeah.
was the first times in my life that I thought, oh, yikes. So I can't wait for the feeling of excitement and motivation to
That's
exercise.
right.
No, you
Yeah.
can't. Otherwise you'll sit there and you'll
And decades will pass.
Yeah.
Decades will pass.
Yeah, that old T-shirt I saw years ago, this big guy, and it said sometimes I feel like exercising, but I lay down until the feeling goes away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny. It's that identity that gets so tricky. But all of us have stuff. Everybody. I don't care who you are, whether you want to admit it or not, but you've got it. And being willing to adjust and move into a new identity with different dreams and goals, and changing your mind and changing your body and flipping those epigenetic switches, all of that. Adrienne, you've done that. You've
And
done
it's
that.
a muscle, right? It's a muscle.
Yeah.
So the first time it's like, oh, I can't do that. I'm too tired. I'm too overweight. I'm too depressed. I'm too whatever, right?
Yeah.
Well, just try. See, okay. If you can't
Yeah.
do that, see what can you do? The two things that I remember learning from the bridge were the thing that was carved on the little graduation
Oh yeah.
thing was the more
Cool.
you do, the more you can do. And the one that's important, but I don't use it, on a daily basis. But one that I use a lot is in this moment I choose.
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
that's what it's about. I have days that, I was in a coma in 2002, and I wasn't in God's home, but I was closer to where God lives than we are here. And I miss that every day, Darren.
Mm.
But I'm called to serve where my eyes open up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a rescue mission for both of us. We're on rescue missions. The thing is, the one you're saving is you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you try to take as many people as you can with you.
Yeah.
I like that old hair club for men. Most people won't remember that, but there's that hair transplant, thing that used to be on TV all the time. The guy would always say, not only am I the owner, I'm a satisfied client.
Oh
And
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I always feel like saying that about the bridge. I'm like, yeah, I've got these amazing providers. I get to do my part, and then glean off of everybody else's wisdom and insight, and just keep moving forward. And I just couldn't be more proud of you. If I would have seen you in the wheelchair, slumped over, totally emaciated, with the feeding tube in and sunglasses on, and your mom's like, "Hey, if anything happens, I don't hold you accountable," drove away. If I would have been able to look at you then in that moment and say, "Oh, don't worry, she'll end up recovering and running her own program," I would have been much the better at treating you then. And experiences like that with you have helped me now when people show up that way.
Aw.
Really, I can say, oh, I have these experiences with these people like Adrienne that hmm, I have faith in your ability to get better. I believe in you. And people look at me like, you don't know me. You have no idea how dark it's
Yeah.
got, no idea where I've been. I've attempted 3 times. I've these messes, these crazy messes.
And we know where they've been.
Yeah, but
You've been in
experience.
the dark. You taught me that, right? The dark is the dark.
Yeah. But having the experiences that I've had over the years and the experience I had with you, it's made me even more confident in my own difficulties when they come, and also in everybody's ability to recover, because you really were an example of maybe not. And when you went through that and continue to dance through that, with some grace and with some vinegar, and I mean, we've had some good discussions over the years too, but I just had to have you on this Miracle Healings podcast.
Yeah.
I think you absolutely embody a miracle healing, especially of how honest you are about the constant effort that it takes. This is not throw away your crutches and run into daisies. This is every morning you dust yourself off and you
Right.
splash some water in your face, and you get to work, right?
Because God heals, right? I'm not cured because there is no cure for pancreas divisum, but I'm healed, right? God has graciously set me free. And I think that he's waiting in the wings to do that for everyone. But it's just like, unconditional love is a funny thing because you can't make somebody do something. You can't make anybody do anything.
Right. It's
You can
true.
only make it available.
True.
And what you did was started a process in me. I still needed a few years to work it out. I think it's okay to say it doesn't have to be an overnight success story. That that's that's the way extreme. Why are we shooting for the Hail Marys?
Right.
The turtle beats the hare because he's consistent and he's diligent.
Right. No, it's true.
And and none of us have the right to sit on the sidelines.
No, I agree. I agree. And I agree that in principle, but it doesn't transfer into enough humans, but it has transferred into you. And I just think it's amazing. So um I know you're busy. I so appreciate your time today.
Of course.
Anything you want to say? Anything to to say goodbye
Yeah,
with?
I would just say, if anybody is certainly Darren's got my information. If anybody is on the fence, I'd love to talk to you personally about why the bridge is the place to go. I mean, literally, we had been looking for something like the bridge for quite a long time, and I believe it was just God at the right time at the right place that my mom found the bridge. And just do your best while you're there. You're going to be foggy while you're there, but keep I kept the manuals,
Yeah.
and I read through the manuals long after I had been to the bridge.
Well, I appreciate
Just
yeah.
keep at it. Keep at it.
Love it. Love it. Love it. And Adrienne's podcast is Recovery Comes Home. Is that right?
Recovery Comes Home Radio.
Recovery Comes Home Radio. Tune into that. She's got some great content there. And I'm sure we'll have you on again. This can't be the
Yeah.
last. We
No, it won't be the last.
we'll have to keep catching up. But I'm so appreciative of your time and love you to pieces and look forward to keeping in touch and keep walking this road and having a ball.
Yeah. Sounds great, Darren.
Yeah,
Thank
talk.
you.
Yeah, we'll see you. Yep. Bye.